Will someone turn that goddamn alarm off? Finally, this is Site V. We have a containment breach. SCP-001-V has escaped its containment cell and has started to fuse with the other anomalies on site. All procedures for SCP-096, SCP-682 and SCP-4335 have failed. All attempts to reacquire SCP-001-V have also failed. On-site personnel have either been infected or have been killed. It appears that any living organism or SCP that becomes infected will be a part. There you have it. That's all we have from Incident SCP-001-V-1. The O5 Council has approved this mission to access Site V and establish what happened. Our objectives are as follows. Access Site V. Establish why the final containment protocol failed. Record all data and information regarding SCP-001-V. Establish what caused SCP-001-V to escape containment. Capture any escaped anomalies. For this, we have several agents and multiple D-Class personnel allocated by the O5 Council. There's a file on SCP-001-V available for our briefing. Unfortunately, most of it is redacted. However, there's one section that has remained and is crucial in any attempt to recapture SCP-001-V. It reads as follows. SCP-001-V. Class: Euclid. A black liquid ooze that seems to have some potential level of consciousness, able to replicate within a container. Seems to be manageable with heat or sound. Extremely high levels of both have been seen to shrink or destroy parts of SCP-001-V. It has been noted this resulted in what sounded like screaming coming from the substance. The rest is unfortunately redacted. However, from this we've brought several sonic emitters as well as the Echelon Flame Unit, a team with high-powered flamethrowers. We hope these are enough to secure Site V. Arriving at the location of Site V, the site looked to have broken walls, destroyed doors and traces of a black substance thought to be residue from SCP-001-V. Several D-Class personnel were sent to enter the site. The aim was to discover if any of the reported SCPs that had escaped containment were still present. It was only a matter of moments before two D-Class personnel came running out. Screams could be heard and an all too familiar cry. It was SCP-096, the Shy Guy. However, as it charged towards the entrance that the two D-Class personnel came running out of, a black ooze-like tendril shot out and stuck to them before dragging them back, screaming until all of a sudden it went silent. The remaining agents could see a large figure standing in the entrance. While the figure was slightly obscured, one of the agents made eye contact with the creature's eyes. This was a fatal mistake. Within seconds, the creature came running out and started to scream a painful but furious cry. It was SCP-096, the Shy Guy. Only, it looked different. It appeared that the black substance started to become one with this SCP. As you might already know, the only way to survive an encounter with SCP-096 is to avoid looking at the face of this entity. However, if you do look at his face, it will go into an uncontrollable rage, and it will not stop until whoever looked at it is no more. It soon became apparent that SCP-096 was far more aggressive than normal, and instead of returning to its more docile state, it did become calmer and went back into the facility. It was apparent that SCP-096 had been altered by SCP-001-V. After it was established that SCP-0096 had returned far enough into the facility for it to be safe to advance, a selected team of agents, some remaining D-Class personnel and two members of the Echelon Flame team entered the facility. It did not take long before they encountered the second SCP that had become infected from contact with SCP-001-V. Upon seeing this SCP, one of the D-Class members turned and ran in the other direction. This was when the D-Class personnel stepped on a piece of the black substance and began to scream as the residue of SCP-001-V started to climb up their body and engulf them in a completely black cocoon. This confirmed that SCP-001-V was far more infectious and dangerous than the Foundation had initially thought. At that moment, the remaining members of the team turned around as they heard a loud growl coming from behind them. For a brief time they had forgotten about the infected SCP, an SCP that's difficult to contain at the best of times without it being infected. This is perhaps one of the worst scenarios for the members that entered Site V. The SCP before them was one that the Foundation has ordered to be destroyed as soon as possible. However, all attempts at present have failed. Even SCP-096 was unable to kill this SCP. In fact, SCP-096 had developed a strange reaction, and when faced with this particular SCP, SCP-096 will not attack it but instead retreat, even when its face has been seen. Of course, if you have high enough clearance, you might be able to tell which SCP we are referring to. For those of you who are new or have a lower clearance, the SCP in question was SCP-682, the hard-to-kill reptile. This SCP has survived encounters with a wide range of other anomalies and methods to kill a living organism. What makes SCP-682 truly terrifying is even if it is killed, it will heal or come back to life, usually evolving a defense for the next time it encounters that threat. Without a moment's hesitation, the members of the Echelon Flame team used their flamethrowers on SCP-682. This caused it to cry out in pain, as part of SCP-001-V caught alight. At this point, it was almost like all of the residue of SCP-001-V were screaming in pain as a spine-chilling cry could be heard echoing throughout the facility. The Foundation members outside jumped in shock as the harrowing sound filled their hearts with fear. They looked towards the entrance of Site V, wondering what had happened to the other members that had entered. Were they still alive? As the cry began to subside, none of the agents outside were able to move towards the entrance. At this time, they were all frozen in fear. Meanwhile, back in Site V, the flamethrowers were starting to have less and less effect on SCP-682. The team decided to move further into the facility in order to trap SCP-682 in a containment cell. The plan, although dangerous, seemed to be working. One of the remaining D-Class were ordered to stay in the cell, told to wait for SCP-682 before making an escape and closing the door. The D-Class didn't want to act as bait and wait in the cell. The D-Class didn't want to wait and act as bait on their own in the cell. But one of the agents held up his sidearm and ordered the D-Class into the cell. The trap was set. The rest of the team hid out of sight. SCP-682 spotted the D-Class personnel in the cell and entered, slowly stopping just inside to block the entrance. As the D-Class looked in fear, realizing there was no escape, SCP-682 could be seen smiling with the most terrifying and sinister smile imaginable. SCP-682 opened its mouth wide and a longer tongue than normal came out. In that moment, SCP-682 launched at the D-Class and started to eat them alive. Before it finished, the rest of the team waiting outside had rushed to shut the door. A tendril shot out from the back of SCP-682, hitting the first agent and dragging them into the cell. Its mouth opened wide, with half a person hanging out, legs dangling as you could hear the crunch of bones breaking and the muffled screams of the agent ceased. The next agent to the door had a sonic emitter. During all this time, the team had forgotten that they'd taken some emitters in with them. SCP-682 finished swallowing the remains of the agent and turned towards the entrance of the cell. Suddenly, SCP-682 charged towards the agent. In that moment, he suddenly came to his senses and turned the sonic emitter on, causing SCP-682 to stop mid-charge in immense pain. The residue of SCP-001-V began to vibrate. The terrifying scream started to echo throughout the facility again. It was at this moment the agent sealed the door and left the emitter on a steady pulse pointed at the doorway, trapping SCP-682 within the containment cell. The agents knew this might only be a temporary measure, but for now they'd finally contained one of the SCPs that had been infected and escaped when SCP-001-V breached its containment. After a sigh of relief, the last few remaining members of the team went further into Site V. As they continued towards the centre of the facility, the plan was to head towards the control room and see what had happened. It was the objective of the agents to access Site V. They had accomplished this, albeit with some difficulty. Establish why the final containment procedure had failed. They would need to access the control room to check the logs for this. Record all data on SCP-001-V. The body cams and mics that the agents were wearing had been recording all along and sending information back to the Foundation. This confirmed several theories about SCP-001-V. Establish what caused SCP-001-V to be able to breach containment. Unfortunately, this was unknown at the time, and to do this, needed to access the control room. Capture any escaped SCPs. One SCP, SCP-682, had been captured or contained, although SCP-096 and SCP-001-V were still uncontained. The only problem with this plan was the surviving members of the team were unable to find any signs or directions to the control room. They had a rough idea where it was, but the walls and ceilings had been covered by the black residue of SCP-001-V, with patches on the floor, allowing agents to proceed further into the facility. At the time the team were making their progress, they were unaware that the path behind them was being blocked by SCP-001-V. It had been slowly covering the floor, making it impossible to backtrack and exit Site V. The only area that still had any floor left was where the sonic emitter had been placed. The sound waves were keeping SCP-001-V at bay. The team came towards a room with an open door. A monitor screen could be seen, but they were unable to tell if it was the control room or not. Unfortunately, they had little choice but to enter. The last surviving D-Class was sent into the room. After several minutes, nothing had happened to the D-Class. The agents decided the room was safe, and they also entered. As they did, the monitor on the screen flickered, and the team could see the popular game Minecraft. They were a bit confused to see this, until one of the agents realised what was happening, and they began to look more and more terrified. I know what this is. It's SCP-44... It's SCP-4335. A Minecraft entity. It can go from server to server and it grows in size when it eats rare items and stuff. The only way to shrink it is with ender pearls, and rumour has it that endermen in the game are instances of SCP-4335. I was told it can use auditory and visual hallucinations. We need to get out of here now or we're all going to die. It was at that point there was a loud crackle and sound of thunder. A flash filled the room, and in an open area space, all of a sudden there were two new characters within the room. One covered in a strange mechanical armour that was brownish in colour and looked a bit like a gopher. The other was more rugged looking, with a spear in one hand and an armour that looked like he was out of a fancy role-playing game or movie.
That was a bit rougher than normal. What is this place? It's all dark and disgusting. What's this black stuff on the walls? It kind of looks alive. Gross. Hey, Ehrenfold. You okay over there? Sturdy man like you could handle a little bit of turbulence, right?
Aye, lad. 'Twas a bit rougher than the last jump we did, but nothing good old Ehrenfold here can handle. Where are we this time?
No idea. But there's some kind of black stuff all over the place. Looks familiar, but I've got no idea where I've seen it before. Maybe on the news or something. Oh, hey look, Ehrenfold. There's some people over there and oh.
Oh, what'd you say? There's some people over where and oh.
The members of the team were understandably confused and on edge. They had their sidearms drawn and pointed at Nexum and Ehrenfold, the two strangers who had appeared in front of them out of nowhere, unsure if they were SCPs that had escaped containment, new SCPs or anomalies that had entered their dimension. Then one of the agents spoke to the strange pair. Who are you? Where are you from? And what are you doing here?
Hold your horses, pal. Put that thing down and explain what's with all this black stuff all over the place. And what's with all the hostility?
Answer or I'll shoot. We don't have time for this.
Calm down there, my boy. I've seen that look on your face before. The look of fear in your eyes as some beastie or creature has been stalking or hunting you. Something that can send chills down your bone and make a grown man lose control of his senses and faculties. What's going on here? Tell old Ehrenfold I'll slay whatever beastie it is that troubles ya. Just put down your weapon and let me know where it is. Ain't no beast I've encountered that can get the best of good old Ehrenfold.
Hey kid, he ain't lying to you. I've seen him in action in the last dimension we're in. These giant creatures that were there, well, let's just say they didn't stand the chance. That being said, my mech armor was crucial in that fight. But trust me, he's the real deal.
I don't have time to tell you and explain what's going on in detail. But don't let that black stuff touch you and do what we say. If you don't, you'll become infected by SCP-001-V. You said you're from another dimension. This is dimension 692.
Ehrenfold, we won't be able to leave here for a while. Looks like that last jump fried part of the doohickey I used to travel dimensions. So, dimension 692. And what's an SCP, was it?
Aye, what manner of beastie is this SCP? Is it this black stuff? Will it bleed if I slash the wretched thing? Let's slay this thing, shall we?
You might just get your wish. Hey kid, is that thing behind you one of those SCP things you're on about? Doesn't look that scary. Kinda looks like it'll make an interesting mech armor, if I do say so myself.
The agent turned around, and behind him was SCP-4335, half out of the computer screen and infected by SCP-001-V. SCP-4335 shot tendrils out and grabbed all of the members of the team, including Ehrenfold and Nexon. It pulled them towards him and dragged them all into the computer screen, taking them all into the game known as Minecraft. The agents, who remained outside of Site V, heard one message from SCP-001-V. It was as if the whole infected part of the facility spoke in a terrifying voice that said,
"We are Venom."
This has got to be one of the craziest starts to a kind of continuation series on the channel that's happening now. Not only have we got SCPs, we've got Venom symbiotes, and we've got Nexum and Ehrenfold joining into the Minecraft universe. That being said, don't forget the community redraw is open. Details to submit are in the description below. And this one's just design a demon character, do a full body shot and a headshot, and a bit of information about what powers or abilities or weaknesses or personality the creature has. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see some more Venomized characters, then why not have a look at the playlist, which I'll link on screen. And also, why not check out if Minecraft characters were in Dungeons & Dragons.